Yes.
there for that. So.
Um,
He'll be in again, sure.
You can always come.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess if Kevin comes in, we'll.
I'm here.
Oh, there you. I'm sorry. Come on up here.
Yeah,
I thought I still heard voices in there. I thought you were still in there.
They're still there, I think, but I'm over here. Yeah, I'll give you the monthly report on the activities of the Conservation Advisory Council and the Climate Smart Commission there. I guess the sort of the substantive discussion is probably with the open space plan, which I think if the council members, we could probably take this offline at a different point, but if the council members want to discuss the eminent domain implications of it, or lack thereof, I can do that. There's a vision map attached to the plan that I think some people have misinterpreted as advocating for eminent domain, and it does not do that. So, I mean, you know, we had considered that at the council, and we don't, yeah, that's not in the cards. I mean,
So why the confusion?
that's probably coming from two, at least as far as I can tell, from different developers. One of whom I'm going to be speaking to try to clarify that would be down, you know, in the Rondout area. The other person, I don't know. That's something that was happening uptown, as far as I know, in the floodplain, and I believe they're having some issues with the county, and that's separate from anything that we're doing here. As far as that vision map goes, it throws out, you know, the vision map itself is that's what it is. It's a vision map. It's a wish list. You know, it doesn't provide any real guidance other than this would be nice if it happened. What if it doesn't happen? Yeah, so it's that simple. And it throws out, you know, certain amounts of acreage, and some people thought that was directed at them. As the Land Use Committee chairperson of the Kingston Land Trust, we'll switch the hat around so it's Kingston Land Trust here for a second. I've had discussions with other owners that are not the two owners that I know have raised objections. So, I can take that offline. We don't need to spend all night discussing the open space plan because there were a couple of other things. We'll switch over to Climate Smart for a moment, unless people do want to discuss the open space plan further. Are there other questions?
Anybody?
And feel free to reach out to me. And I spent 8 years in eminent domain proceedings with the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. So I do have some knowledge on the subject. So, and it can be an expensive proposition to do that for the municipality. I think, Dan, if you want to weigh in on that, the 9% interest on eminent domain, you know, I mean, it's a.
Why are we even speaking about eminent domain?
I think it came up. I was told that this came up
Yeah.
in discussions concerning the open space plan.
Eminent domain's completely
Yeah. Well,
irrelevant to the discussion.
okay. That's the gist of what I was trying to say.
It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with it.
Okay. Well, no, well, I'll let you and the council members, you know, follow up on that discussion. But again, if you need to reach out to me, you know, I'm here to discuss it. At the end of August, Julie Noble submitted the recertification for our Climate Smart Silver status. Apparently, there's no gold status, so we're the top, you know, sort of the top tier in New York State in terms of climate sustainability actions. So that just came. She just reported that in the last meeting.
Do you know how many other municipalities are at silver
I
status?
don't have that information. I think I can probably get that from the DEC. I think it's publicly available.
That'd be great if it's not too hard to get.
No, I think we can do that. Julie may know it off the top of her head. I just don't have it, you know, right here, right this second. But you know, we can follow that up. The other thing that they did over there, they were discussing the advisability of whether the city should declare a global climate crisis by a memorializing resolution. Again, I'll let that somebody else handle that. That's not, you know, this committee is not handling memorializing resolutions.
What was it called?
Global climate crisis. Somebody's drafting language and it isn't me. So, there'll be, I don't know what everybody's opinion is or feelings are on memorializing resolutions, but that would probably be, it'll probably come your way at some point. Back over to the Conservation Advisory Council. We submitted comments on a repeal of a DEC rule. The DEC wanted to repeal some of the rules on wood smoke. Lorraine Farina drafted this, and some of you are familiar with Lorraine. That's one of her big issues, is particulate matter 2.5. And I think the purpose of the state repealing the rule was that the EPA rules are currently more stringent. However, in light of some of the recent rule changes at EPA, the CAC thought that, well, maybe New York State shouldn't repeal that rule just in case the federal does a rollback. At least New York State will have something. So comments to that effect were submitted. And then one of our other commissioners had drafted a letter, which you may be receiving shortly, on implementation of the street tree management plan. We've had a lot of feedback from the public on street trees at the CAC in light of the various different streetscape projects and trees having to be removed, et cetera, and so forth, and what trees to replace them with. And so, I think that it was a letter sent, I believe it's going to be sent to the mayor, CC to the Common Council, and also sent to the Tree Commission, because it's really their purview. And the gist of it would be to implement the street tree management plan, which ArborPro did. Write a grant to purchase iTree software, and as a wish list type thing, to ask for budgeting for a part-time arborist. Again, that'll be submitted, and you can all make a decision on that. And I think I'm done. After any questions
Ready?
further?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, first item. This is once again, I don't see the forms that we tabled all these items last month.
That's what I just gave you.
You did.
The
Well, you gave-
three new things I gave you.
She
Or from John
gave
Schulteis.
the analysis,
Right.
From
John
the-
Schulteis analysis.
but the form itself was
But
not in the
We don't
packet.
have the form.
It was my understanding, Andrea, it was our understanding that Andrea was having a meeting on this whole situation. We're not clear in our office what's supposed to be going on. Kyle doesn't know what's supposed to be going on. And it's my understanding that they were going to have a meeting about this form and everything else, because there's a lot of confusion, like you had submitted later today on the issue on Hunter Street. Well, we sent that directly to John, because they should go to the engineer first instead of coming to our office. And then once it's resolved, then it would be a communication.
Okay.
That's our understanding right now. It's very unclear. We haven't even been, oh, there she is. See how her September 9th meeting went. We're all very confused.
I was trying to pull up the form that you sent me. That's what they're talking about, the form, the actual form to submit the request.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's the same form that you emailed to me.
The
That
form
I
from the
then-
engineer's office is what I sent to you.
Okay, so is that the form that we're using then for?
Yeah.
Okay, so she has it, so
Okay.
I'm stuck.
Well, my concern here is none of the things on our agenda
Yes.
use the form.
No, they didn't.
No.
Yeah,
So,
but our office doesn't even know about the form. That's why Lisa said there has to be
Well,
some
the form-
clarification. I
the
know
form
you had
has
a
been
meeting
in
on the
development,
ninth, Andrea,
so-
but Lisa didn't know how that turned out. We were gonna have a meeting about this whole thing you had said on the 9th at this last meeting.
Yeah,
With the engineer
about
and
getting
everybody.
it digitally.
Right,
Yeah.
but
I-
she wasn't looped in and she doesn't know.
All right, Andrea, why don't you give us an update
Yeah,
on what's
because we're
going
not
on with it?
sure.
All right, well, did you make copies of the recommendations?
They were on the wall tonight.
Okay, so John had just said he would make recommendations for this month because we were in transition.
Right.
So we wanted to still get his recommendations. So they're not necessarily in the form, even though I had sent to everybody, and I think you guys had sent him the form, but he just sent it as an email back.
Yeah.
which is what we
I
have.
didn't see it. Rita said she saw it.
Yeah, you were copied on the email.
All right.
Doug was copied on it.
Yeah.
You were copied on one of them,
Yes.
at least.
All right, when did that come?
A couple weeks ago.
Really, because I don't recall.
I mean, there was a couple. Is this the agenda?
I don't see the forms in there.
Steve, the policy just says generally that it has to be referred to the engineer for him to make a
Right.
recommendation. Okay, there are a
We
number
wanted
of
the form.
here that have been referred to him without the form,
Right.
and he submitted the recommendation.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of them on this list that I see
There's quite a few.
see recommendations.
Yeah, I could go
He's got
through
two
it if you
sheets.
want.
He's got, the one sheet is two-sided, it deals with 60 Van Buren and analysis of stop signs. The other one deals with Winchell and South Wall.
Yeah, I could go through which ones because most of these he worked through. So, new business. There, he did recommend the no parking signs on Pearl Street, a removal of no parking signs. That was your request, right? So he did send that recommendation, and that should be there.
That's on the back of the sheet.
Okay.
I do not believe he got to the 2B and 2C yet. He's been copying me on everything, and I haven't gotten that.
Okay.
On old business, the Lincoln
How about the no parking on Joy's Lane?
No.
2B and 2C he hasn't gotten to
He
yet.
hasn't, okay.
The 2B, the alternate side parking, where's that? Is that the Van Dusen Street one?
That's the Van Buren
Van Buren
Street.
Because I thought I saw something
Yeah,
in
Van
here.
Buren is on, no, that's not
He-
the impact.
That
He
was
wrote on the request for the 60 Van Buren Street, the handicap parking, he mentioned the alternate side parking on that, saying because he doesn't object to the handicap parking except that there's alternate side parking.
Right.
So we would have to have a handicap sign on both sides of the street. Except when you go down Van Buren, there are no signs that say that it's an alternate side parking, and there are cars that park on both sides of the street, which is what Rita had told us. So Rita had suggested or put in the request for the alternate side parking to be eliminated. I don't know if John got to do the research on that, the study on that yet. I know Ed Norman said that there would be enough room as long as, for snow emergencies. So do it the same way as citywide. The snow emergencies has to be the alternate side parking, but that's the whole city. So, but we haven't gotten an official sign off from John yet. He just hasn't gotten to them because we had so many backed up.
And if, I looked at the charter, the code, I couldn't find Van Buren Street on there anywhere. I sent you guys a copy of this.
Should be in your packet tonight.
So I asked if I was looking at the wrong schedule or the wrong section, that somebody please get it to me.
I think Elise will get it.
What page is it?
I think it's attached to an email
Oh, I see.
from me.
It says PS at the top.
I didn't bring my computer to pull up the code. Dan, you could do that.
I'm looking right now, what is the question?
Van Buren Street, the alternate side parking, because I had noticed it, but this was like a month or 2 months ago, and then that was when John recommended the handicap sign. He also noted that it's alternate side parking in the code.
As we discussed earlier, I think the committee needs to decide how they want it to be going forward, and then we will correct the code accordingly. And we keep going around in circles as to whether it's there, whether it's not there, where it is. You know, you have to decide how you want the street to, you know, to operate. Do you want it to be alternate side? Do you want the alternate side to be eliminated? You know, and once you all decide that issue, we can figure out how to put it into the code and where to put it.
When people park on both sides of the street now, there are no signs that say it's alternate side parking. Ed Norman said he can get his trucks down there, so he doesn't think that should be an issue. The issue would be, of course, snow removal,
Yeah, but
which
it would
be,
be,
but that would have to go with citywide. So
which is what happens now.
exactly. So
Has John issued a recommendation on this? or
John
not?
has not gotten to that one yet. No.
Okay. Well,
So that's as much as I know about that one. So I don't know if you want to wait for the recommendation or non-recommendation, or
I mean, you sort of have to wait for the recommendation.
Yeah, we really
Oh.
can't, we can't move without the recommendation. That was the whole purpose of the, you know,
but the
resolution.
one, because the handicap sign has been waiting on this one, would it be possible to, if everybody here agrees that we could eliminate the alternate side parking, could we say pending John's recommendation, because we have until caucus?
Because you think, well, I mean, that's fine with me if you think,
Well, you can also have a special public safety 3-minute meeting the night of caucus and just do it then, rather
Yeah.
than starting, you know, to carve out exceptions to the policy we only adopted a month ago.
right,
I mean, we discussed when the policy was adopted that there was going to be some transition period.
right. So how many, realistically, how many of these are we waiting for that we might think?
This would be the only one that is, I mean, because this person is waiting for their handicap sign for a while, so,
Right.
you know, that's what I'm just thinking, rush this one is because the only one that we don't have a recommendation for, or the only two, are 2B and 2C.
Right.
Yours is not timely, is it? Could wait another month?
No, I spoke to him. He said he has no problem. He wanted to come today, but I told him we most likely won't make a decision on it because we didn't have the recommendation, so he doesn't mind waiting until next
Okay.
month.
Okay,
So this is the only one that I think is a little trickier, just because I don't know, remember, Rita, when you put this communication for the handicap sign, but it's been a while.
all right, so 2C, why don't we, we want to table that, right?
2C?
2C.
2C is
2C.
is tabled. It will be old business now.
So you think John will have the analysis done by caucus?
I could
Or
really
hopefully-
encourage that.
Okay.
Well,
I can't get anybody to do anything. Sometimes I try, but actually some people say I try too hard. So I don't know if, but Dan has recommended to have a special public safety meeting.
We'll all have to be here anyway.
And it should take all of
Well, that's,
3
you know,
minutes.
that's
Yeah.
pending, that's if he has the analysis done by then.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll talk to him tomorrow and see. It's just, there's a long list. So that's 2B we're talking about. If we could have a special finance
2B,
meeting
right.
on that one, I mean,
Sorry, what?
sorry, we never have special meetings for anything else except finance, so that just
Thank you.
rolled off my tongue.
put that on Doug.
I'll do it, sure.
If you could do a special public safety meeting on that one, I will talk to John and
Okay.
try and get this recommendation set up by Monday.
Okay, fine. You
They
got,
have to be done before Monday, because she's gotta get
The recommendations?
well, Lisa likes to get everything done before caucus. I mean, technically, that's the rule.
Right.
Everything has to, so I would check with her. I don't know what her schedule is next week either, so I don't wanna say she could, I don't know how many other, I don't know how many resolutions you would want her to do then on Tuesday. Potentially, how many?
It should just
But
be
she's
one.
not gonna be here Friday.
It should either be one or two.
Two?
That's it.
Oh, okay, all right,
Yeah.
and that shouldn't, she shouldn't have a problem.
okay.
Okay.
All right, so we'll have a special meeting.
Oh, no, I'll call her tomorrow.
Prior.
so-
Okay, so at 6:30, 6:45?
Yeah, no, 6:30 is fine.
6:30?
I'd rather err on the
Okay.
side of caution.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so that takes care of new business. All right, let's see if we can sort out the old business here. Some of these things I don't see in here.
Steve, do you have
D-
a committee report then on Grove Street, no parking? Do you have a committee report?
Oh, yeah, right, we didn't do that. Okay. All right, so let's back up to 2A. All right, removal of parking signs on Pearl Street. I have a resolution to remove the no parking signs from Pearl Street at the former St. Joseph's School. Do we want to put anything more than that in there?
Well, yeah,
What do you wanna
no,
put?
it's really incomplete, I think. So we take the no parking signs down, then what? Do we put meters in? Do we, what do we do?
Well, I don't know, but I don't think that's our concern tonight is what's gonna happen. We just wanna take down the no parking signs
Which would then allow people to park there.
until such time as we make a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is,
people can park there out of the season, if I remember correctly.
Well, no, they can't now. September 1 to May 30th, between 8:30 and 4, they can.
Right, but I'm just saying, there is parking there now, so it's not like you're introducing a hindrance.
Are there meters there?
Right?
No,
Laws and
but
rules.
it's not,
Put parking meters, we're taking the no parking signs out, but ideally we want to have parking meters in there.
What does the code say about parking on that part of Pearl Street? I mean, is it no parking now?
Right now, because
it's seasonal,
Seasonal no parking.
yeah, during school hours.
we gotta, actually, we have a resolution
I don't know
already
if you
to
have it
remove
packet,
those.
but this is how it reads.
with a recommendation from John to do so as well.
It's just September through.
Oh, for the parking meters?
Yeah.
No, just for the removal.
Eliminating the
Take them
no
down.
parking signs.
Oh, okay, right.
The parking meters is something that you don't have to take up now. I mean, finance can take it up whenever they want.
Right.
Someone can send a communication saying these 3 spots have been added based upon the changes in
Okay.
legislation. I would like there to be parking meters there.
All right, so let's get rid of the no parking signs first,
Yeah,
right? Everybody in agreement?
yes.
Okay, so we have a resolution to remove no parking signs from Pearl Street at the former St. Joseph's School. Motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. All right, so now that takes care of the new business. Okay, so, let's see if we can start sorting these out now. We have the request for a stop at Lincoln and Grant Street, I
Ernie.
believe
That did not get a recommendation from John.
there is,
His recommendation is he objects to that stop sign.
oh, he does, okay.
And I
didn't see
didn't,
that.
Yeah,
it's in there.
Long letter.
it's come out of there, so about 3 or 4.
Yeah, it's in the separate one, right?
It's ones I just gave you. It's that 2-sided letter from John.
And he gives his explanation in there too. So it's everything that's on the form, just not on the form.
Actually, I don't think, when we talked about the new procedure, we haven't addressed what's going to take place if anybody involved objects to this.
If anybody here,
Well, John or,
well, if John objects to it, it's just a recommendation to this committee.
Right.
So whether he objects or
Right, so we're gonna-
approves, it's still this committee's final say. So you could still put it on,
right, okay.
if, everybody else.
We can overrule this objection.
Exactly.
right, so we don't need everybody on board for this, is what we're saying.
Right.
All right. Do we want to read Pat's communication? I'm requesting that stop signs be placed on the corner of Lincoln Street and Grant Street. This intersection is on top of a hill that blocks the oncoming driver view of pedestrians walking up the hill. During the morning, drivers are blinded at this corner by the sunrise. This corner is located 1 block from Hutton Park and gets foot traffic from the park. Please forward this. Okay. Is anybody familiar with this? I'm, vaguely familiar with the situation there. So this is one good thing. It's not a stop time to curtail speeding. I mean, it's from a safety view. So, how does everybody feel about this?
Well, Schulteis says,
He says no, right? But we're not gonna deny it based on, just on John's objection to this. We're still gonna pursue it on its own merit.
Well, except your professional engineer has now indicated that he believes that this is not appropriate. He outlines why he believes it's not appropriate. If you do it anyway, contrary to his recommendation, you really, you need a persuasive reason and you need information. It contradicts what he's saying, and, it's very problematic to disregard the engineer's recommendation with regard to a traffic calming device.
Steve. He also, John put in recommendations, so he didn't just say, no, I object to this. On the bottom of that, he actually gave some suggestions on what we could do to help the situation that's not a stop sign.
All right.
I just, again, didn't print them off, so I don't remember them off the top of my head.
He says you can install a hill blocks view sign with advisory speed plaques. Do you have that at the bottom? You see that, Steve? It might be that one right there, right under the
Okay.
Okay.
Install a hill block view sign. I've never seen one of those with advisory speed plaque.
So those would be advisory signs instead of a regulatory sign.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it would be good practice in our first case here to disregard John. And, we have discussed stop signs at length, about putting up stop signs. I mean, I'm just curious how people are gonna view this hill block view sign. What is that gonna mean to somebody coming up? Because I've never seen a sign like that.
I think we'd have to have him here and talk to us about it.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't see past.
I'd like to see some kind of basis.
Yeah, I can't see past
For
this
this.
resolution
Yeah,
at this point in time. Not when the city, the professional engineer says, I don't think so. But then he says, but then again, we might consider doing that, when he could come talk to us about
yeah.
what we might consider.
I mean, I would
Until
certainly,
then, I would say no.
I'd be a lot more comfortable with John here
Yeah.
explaining his recommendations.
None of us know what he's talking about.
Right.
Steve?
Yeah.
Well, you can see it on here, there's not, I don't see that it's that obstructed of a view. I think the problem is just it's a straight street, and so cars on Lincoln could probably get up a fair amount of speed. The thing that looks like a problem to me is you've got a lot of trees and foliage next to the street, and the better thing, if that stuff is still there, would be to cut that back.
Well, and stop signs aren't supposed to be for traffic speed control.
Right, I'm saying.
But John's recommending advisory signs. Those don't need legislation, correct?
No legislation, and he actually, between John and Department of Public Works, they have the discretion to do it without legislation.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not amending the code to require anything.
All right. So should we just, we could refer this back to John and say, if you think this is an appropriate solution?
Well, I would refer it back to Patrick. It's his ward if he wants to try that
Alright.
solution. If this committee doesn't move forward with a stop sign, then Patrick could talk to John and then talk to DPW.
Yeah, Patrick, I mean, he's the champion for this.
Right, yeah. All right. So we'll table this. I'll call Pat, tell him to touch base with John and see what he wants to do with this.
Yeah,
Good?
yeah.
Yep. Well, we're not,
What?
technically we're not tabling because we haven't voted on it.
All right, okay. Well,
Would this be one you'd be doing Tuesday, or you don't think
Right.
so?
No.
No.
Oh, so just so far as the first, there's two on top.
we will continue
Just-
with
One
all
Monday,
business.
special meeting. then.
Just to be.
Just two big.
Yeah,
Oh,
2C is just, we're gonna wait another month, so that'll go on old business for next
So
month.
that's table till October.
Yes, 2C is tabled, and 2B
And
will be the,
3A, we're gonna assume till October as well?
Yes.
and then 3B, John did, do a recommendation, and he agreed with that one. So he is recommending a stop sign to be added at that location.
Isn't he saying just to keep the one that's there, not to remove the one that's there?
A stop sign, wasn't this?
We're talking about Winchell and South Wall?
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly. I thought Bill had requested to add a stop sign.
That's what I thought.
Oh, he's requesting to add one, but I thought John's recommendation was not to do that.
Do you have it?
Yeah, Bill doesn't really say what he's asking, he's just saying, he said, through the Florida Problem Committee, request for a stop.
I think that's the issue, isn't it? There's a stop sign on South Wall,
Right.
but there's not one when you're entering from Winchell.
Right.
And so that's the problem that Bill is concerned with, is that people from Winchell can just like veer onto South Wall.
They said I concur with your suggested change at this location, as it is supported by
Oh, okay,
traffic
that's
engineer
right.
at the very top.
Right, and then all way placards. Okay, sorry, I misread it.
It's okay.
Are there any extra copies of that recommendation?
Oh, I see, because he was saying it's not
That's the one
recommended to
Pete
take
just
out.
found us.
That's the one
Pete
he gave
just
us.
found us.
Do you want to look at this one?
You're a voting member, not me, so you should.
Okay. Same one, all right.
So I think that makes a lot of sense in that place.
So stop sign painted Barn Winchell Avenue and Wall.
Yes.
And then he said also add all way to the existing stop signs.
Yes.
But do we need an engineer review on this?
That is
That's what he's got.
the engineer review.
Oh, and
Done. No.
he says, engineering says.
John said he agreed to the suggestion.
All right, so John recommends a stop sign and a stop bar on Winchell Avenue. And the stop sign would be removed as they are not warranted by usual practice. Okay, removal of the stop sign on South Wall is not recommended. All right, so John recommends a stop sign on Winchell and leave the stop sign. So really, he's only recommending installing a stop sign on Winchell Avenue.
And
Am I reading
adding,
that?
adding all-way signs to the existing stop signs.
Say that again?
Adding all-way
Oh, all way, right.
to the existing.
following that?
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, so we have a resolution to add a stop sign and painted stop bar on Winchell Avenue at South Wall Street as per attached recommendation from John Schulteis. Should we put the additionally?
The all
Or is that
way.
speaking for itself?
No, I think that would have to be added, otherwise DPW wouldn't know to do it. Am I wrong, Dan?
Say again?
We have to include in the resolution to add the all-way placards, right, on the
I'm gonna add that.
existing stop sign?
Yeah.
Okay. So I added, additionally, all-way placards are to be added to all stop signs at this location. Good? Motion?
Motion?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Okay, 3C, handicap parking on 60 Van Buren. John has,
So this is the one that John recommends, but he said he didn't know how it would work with the alternate side parking.
all right.
So I think this
okay.
is the one that will also have to wait
Yeah,
for
but
the
this is
special
different.
public safety, because if you're taking away the alternate side parking, then you could just have one at 60, and if you're not taking the alternate side parking away, then you have to have handicap parking on each side. So I don't think you can make that decision until,
All right. So we're gonna leave that on, as old business, right? Until
can you put that on the
That's
special
what I was
public
just gonna
safety?
we- okay.
Okay.
All right, we're up to 6 minutes of a meeting now.
And also the one at 38 Van Dusen, I'm assuming?
Probably not.
No? No, that's gonna go, okay, so just the others.
Just the, so 2B and 3C.
So far.
All right. You all clear on that?
Got it.
All right.
Both of those pertain to the same issue, so why are they separate?
Well, because the alternate 2B is Rita's communication
Request
to,
to make it,
Okay.
to take away alternate side
Okay.
parking.
All right.
And the other one is a handicap
So,
sign
they're like
on the
this.
Same street,
but different.
cousins.
Yes. First cousins.
Okay. 3D. Okay. 2-hour parking at 190 Fair Street. Okay. So, engineering does not object to this. Schedule 17 already designates this as a 2-hour limited time slot. Adding signs will make the location agree with the code.
These were the signs that were taken down, right?
Right.
So
signs that were
they were
taken down.
already
Right.
throughout.
So, and then this wouldn't, if that's correct, which I assume it is, then we don't even need a resolution for this.
No,
DPW
they
just
can
should
just
put them
put
up.
signs
So
back
we were
up,
told
right.
that they were taken down because they did not follow
Right.
the code.
Now we're being
but-
told something different.
Yeah. After months and months.
Okay, so we would just notify DPW to put signs back up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was a long time, wasn't it?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody, very much.
Will you do that, Rita? Will you contact?
So no, it's done, right?
What?
Rita, you
Comment
gonna
on-
take
Yes,
care of that,
I'll,
Rita?
I'll contact
She's not
them
gonna put 'em
tomorrow-
up.
tomorrow to tell them.
Oh.
No, I meant to contact DPW to put them
Oh,
up.
I'm
I'm like, wait, she's gonna put up the signs?
I will. Thanks very much.
That's awful. We
Right.
had 3-4 months for this.
I don't know about you, but I'm glad to get that one off the calendar.
He's checking it right now
Yeah,
because there's,
John said it's in the code.
John says it's in the code, yeah.
And DPW
Said
said
it
it
wasn't,
wasn't.
said somebody's wrong. If it's not in the code, then you gotta do a resolution.
It's very pretty.
What else am I gonna do? Trying to figure out how to do this automatic things on the credit card now.
It says Fair Street, North Front Street to Maiden Lane, is all it says for 2 hours on fire. Okay, so.
So
I don't know.
Well, this is,
Should we amend it to the specific address?
because it just says Fair Street.
All it says here, it says Fair Street on both sides from North Front Street to Maiden Lane.
So does 190 fit in that? Can somebody?
Yeah, that's what
It's very broad.
But if 190 is in that,
190,
then
Well,
190 is on Fair Street, isn't it?
it's on Fair Street. But between, do you know what between?
Between those two
Then you're gonna
streets.
go from North Front Street, which is way up, all the way down to Maiden Lane.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering where 190 fits into all that.
It's in the
Between
middle of the
Pearl
block.
and Maiden.
Oh, it's between, 19 is between Maiden and St.
Or
James.
St. James. But you want it specific to an address, right?
Yeah. So
But if
we
it-
we would need a resolution then.
There are currently no signs on Fair Street between North Front and Maiden Lane indicating 2-hour parking.
Right.
Okay, so either you have to amend the code to delete the provision that says that whole stretch is 2-hour parking and replace it with something that says 2-hour parking at this address. Or you leave it the way it is and you put up signs on the whole stretch that says 2-hour parking.
But this spot is outside that stretch.
Are we sure about that?
No, this goes to Maiden Lane.
190? Yes, but this is between Maiden Lane and St. James.
Right, but what he's
So it's on the
reading
other side
is
of North Front.
from Maiden Lane all the way to North Front Street.
Which is the other side.
It goes the other way.
Okay.
Right, but
So-
so you're coming from North Front Street and you're turning on Fair to Maiden Lane, the way that reads.
You'd be coming from North Front Street on Fair Street, you'll hit Maiden Lane first, then you hit St. James.
So if you go to number 2.
Well, too bad, because we could have asked her if she objects to having it a block away.
She was.
Yeah,
Yeah, she wants them where they were. And- Right, and
here we go.
they actually were on the side, because the titles,
Here's North Front, you're going down Fair, there's Maiden Lane, so that's the area that's now the stretch. 190 is here.
It's out of the
It's
stretch.
out of that stretch.
So you need
So
to
all we have to
go
do is pass legislation saying 2-hour parking in front of 190 Fair Street.
Yeah, apparently.
He's talking about schedule 17. As opposed to schedule 19, which we should clean all of this up because these appear in 6 different places of the code. Hold on.
Can somebody send a communication to Corporation Council to get this all cleaned up?
Yeah, good idea. No, schedule 17 says, east side, says the same thing.
So that was the mistake.
Between Maiden Lane and St. James, it says, is this between Maiden Lane and St. James?
Yes.
On Fair? And
Mhm.
is it on the,
No, it's between Maiden and what's across from Franklin now?
St.
No,
James.
St. James Street.
St.
and
James.
is it on the east side of that street?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, then it is in the code in a separate section. It's
Yes.
in a different, it's in a place where it shouldn't be.
Okay. But it's in there.
So it makes,
so,
Hold on a second.
so it's an easy mistake to make. Not that it makes it any better, but.
So
I want to
should we amend the code to put it where it should be?
No, you should put the sign back up in accordance with Schedule 17. And at some point, you need to consolidate Schedule 17 with, I believe, Schedule 21 or 22, because 21, whatever the other section is, deals with 2-hour parking. Schedule 17 deals with limited time parking, but a number of the limited time parking places are for 120 minutes, which is 2 hours. So they should all be together in the 2-hour parking
But
limits.
that's what I'm saying, now that we're discussing it, should we
yes, the
look
whole
into
thing,
doing what you,
I don't-
amending that?
clean the whole thing.
I think we gotta talk to the Code Bureau and see if they can just do it. Yeah, I think the Code Bureau can just reorganize the schedules to put the 120-minute parkings in the 2-hour parking section where they belong.
So you want 121,
and it's not really going to be amended.
Schedule 17.
Just kind of just moving into the right place. We're not changing.
We're not changing anything,
Just
cleaning it up.
Schedules 20.
So we might not have to do anything.
Yeah, I don't think you need a resolution. I think the Code Bureau could just move them around.
so you want the one.
And Rita
21
still
into
just
17, or
tells
do you want
DPW to put up
121?
signs.
All right,
We'll figure that out. We'll talk
According
the Code
to
Bureau.
Section 17?
we're back to the code people.
Yeah.
Who is the code bureau?
General code.
No one you need to
Sarah.
know about that.
You don't want to know them, they're their own little people.
Who?
That's what
They
we
have an
say.
office up in Albany. They take care of all of these things magically.
Actually,
So
they're up in
that's the
Rochester.
problem.
Actually, they're up in Rochester.
Magically.
People.
It was like a hide and seek game.
Okay. So we're good here?
Okay, so
All
that's
right,
just
so-
going through with no resolution, correct?
Right.
Somebody's gonna reach out to DPW on this?
Yes.
Okay. So make that known.
So this could be gone off the,
It's committee to just request.
Are we good?
Yeah.
All right, moving on to 3E. This is you, Rita. All right, so John objects to this.
He objects to this because he says that this is a no parking, right? Is that what he said?
yeah, there's no parking on this street and it is a very narrow street.
Yes.
You want to talk to John?
It's not that narrow, and I can tell you that people park on it all the time.
Yeah.
It's right around the corner from where I live. Little short street. It's not real narrow street, it's just a real short street.
Yeah.
But,
Could a fire truck get through there?
No, it's
yes,
really narrow.
it's not that narrow, Andrea. I live right around the corner from there.
I went down that street with Ed Norman, who said his garbage trucks would not be able to fit if he had two streets, or two
Cars
cars.
parked on that street all the time.
Right, because there's no signs. But not on the even side, on the odd side. 38 is,
Yeah, but there shouldn't
Right
be,
there.
there shouldn't be any parking on either side of the street.
Both sides prohibited,
yeah.
it says.
But if you put it at 38, you're putting it on the side where cars aren't parked. And I mean, he said he couldn't fit his trucks down there, and I imagine the fire engines wouldn't be able to fit down
Well,
there too.
I mean, I get, that's his objection, the safety aspect of it, because of the narrow street.
So is there another spot on the block, Rita, that we could put this handicap sign? That would be fairly close.
Where's the house, in the middle of the block? Or is it close to an intersection? That we could put it around the corner or something, like we did on somebody over on Schufelt Street, we put it around the corner on a smaller street.
I would have to ask, I would have to go look at it.
Sterling or Delmont is the closest.
Yeah, it's a little short street.
Yeah.
It's, so is Belmont Street.
And there's not much room
So,
on
and Van
Delmont.
Duzen runs into Prospect.
Alright. Do you want to check that out, Rita, see if you can find an acceptable alternative to that?
Yeah, I'll take.
I mean, I would hate to overrule John's objection
I'm
of the
not
safety
gonna
issue.
overrule his, objection, you know, I will tell the constituent that he doesn't recommend it because of what he says here.
Okay, so we can remove this.
Permanently?
I mean, that hardly looks like there's
Where's 38? Between Prospect and?
between Broadway and
Okay,
Delmont.
okay, so 3F,
There.
there's no recommendation,
No, there was a recommendation for that.
He doesn't object.
He doesn't
well, I mean, no
object.
recommendation by this committee.
Oh, you mean 3E,
What?
3E.
What did I say?
3F.
I'm sorry, jumping ahead. Yes, 3F, sorry.
Oh,
So what I'll
3E.
do, I mean, I'll go there and
3E.
see if we can maybe find an alternative. I don't know how far away it is from this house.
Okay, good?
What?
We're done with that?
So 3E is going to be off because Rita will come
Yeah,
back
it's
with another.
completely removed. That's-
Yeah, 'cause Rita will
If there's
come-
a new communication, it's gonna be totally different.
Yeah, it'll be a different number, so it has to be a new.
Oh, so, Rita, it's only 2 houses in from Delmont.
But there's not much room on Delmont.
But if it's not a no parking street, they could put
Well, Delmont, there's no, oh, they actually do park on Delmont, but there's no, those are the back of the houses that face Delmont, or the sides of the houses. So they normally park in the front or they have
Because
them.
even on the map, there's
Drives.
houses, there's cars parked there.
Yes, well, cars park there all the time. Or else they wouldn't have anywhere to park.
Okay. 3F.
That one's done, that's
All
been
right,
taken care of.
removal of handicap parking, no objections from John on this.
It's been done.
They already took it out?
Yes.
Okay.
Somehow there was already a resolution like 3 months ago on this.
Oh, was there? Yeah, it sounded familiar. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That takes care of all of those items. Now we are moving on to the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit.
Did you all get the revisions that I sent around by email?
I didn't get a
You
chance to
said
read
that
it.
today.
Last night. And then Dee, I know you said there's a copy here, but I don't see it. It's the same. I see 2 or 3 versions of the old one, not the new one.
No, it was with that new packet I just gave you
I
tonight.
know. I looked through there. I didn't see it.
No? This. Yep.
Yeah,
We
this
all
is
got
it.
that.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Do you have an extra copy?
Do I have
It's not, I have it on the computer.
Do you have that in your packet?
I just was getting, I had extras.
page number 2?
It's the,
No, she
I
didn't.
can't even
It's
read
the
some of
resolution.
these things.
Huh?
It's the resolution.
Wait a minute, that's.
I can't even read
The
some of
proposed
these things.
All the way at the
Oh, I
end
know,
of
they're
there.
so old they wouldn't print out right.
It's that
Betty,
right
can I
there,
see
see?
that?
It's not in that packet, yeah.
Can I see that to make a copy for Andrea, please?
I don't think Doug has a copy either.
Do you have another copy? I can't find it.
Here.
Two-sided on this thing,
Oh, well, actually, you can let Andrew look at the one. I've got it on my phone here. In 1.5. Oh,
And
thank you.
it's on the packet.
All right, so the 2 main concerns that I heard about it were, one, that we should make it a more robust argument, and I've done that in several ways. The other argument was to clarify, or the other request was to clarify that this would not create 25-mile-per-hour speed limit on every single street in Kingston, so I've also done that. In terms of the first one, adding more information, I've given a kind of history element to it, so pointing out that parts of Kingston were built way before modern vehicles, and so some of these streets are just not made to handle, that kind of speed. They're much too narrow, too curvy, too intersectiony, those sorts of things. I also consulted with the members of the Complete Streets Advisory Council, and that includes both Bob Dennison, who's former high-ranking engineer in the New York State Department of Transportation, and Brian Slack, who currently handles transportation issues for the county. And so they suggested and let me know a couple things. One is, so I've added information here, that the New York State Department of Transportation guidelines, these are also called the TSMI guidelines, they no longer use the traditional 85% of speeding motorists as a means of justifying whether a street needs to be changed. Rather, they talk about collecting information, objective collection of data, and having a qualified engineer such as John Schulteis make the judgment about whether particular streets should be reduced to 25 miles per hour. So, in other words, what this is now doing is now speaking the language, in a sense, of the New York State Department of Transportation. It's putting a request in the terms of their own way of thinking about these issues, puts it squarely within the purview of our engineers, so that it's not, something where we just decide willy-nilly which streets become 25 miles an hour. And I've added historical elements to it so that it's clear that since Kingston is not a modern city, that we have issues that we have to deal with, and a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit creates problems. There was also data from the the Safe Routes to School project that demonstrated that lots of parents are fearful about their children walking through traffic to school. And so the irony is they're driving their children to school and they're creating the very traffic problems that they're worried about. So this would be one part of helping to reduce that fear, that question throughout the city. So I think this is now a pretty strong case, and remember, the point here is not to actually change speed limits, it's to get permission from the state to change speed limits in those places where we, after consultation or after study by our local engineer or other appropriate engineer, would be able to make that decision about whether it should be a smaller or slower speed limit. So that adds to the main impetus of it before was there are large numbers of studies from the Federal Highway Safety Administration that demonstrate that 25-mile-an-hour speed limit is safer for pedestrians, leads to less injury, less damage in motor vehicle crashes, and in general is a much better speed limit for those streets where it's appropriate. Yeah.
Have you talked to John about, first of all, because there are a lot of different kinds of engineers. So would this be specific to what he is trained to look into?
It says here that it has to be a traffic engineer. So it couldn't just be any engineer. And I know John's got a lot of experience in traffic. So if he doesn't fit the bill though,
we would have to pay for somebody else to do it.
We'd have to have a study done.
Okay. And also,
but there's also studies that are done through the county, so we could piggyback off those too.
Just because I would imagine if we're looking at every individual street, it's a very large workload.
You can do areas too. You don't have to do specific streets.
Do we have specific streets in mind where you want to change the limit to 25?
Yeah, so if you're down in your neighborhood, there's a lot of streets down there around Hone Street, older parts of the city. There are parts of Uptown where you have some very narrow streets, even out in 3rd Ward, which is more recently built. There's some narrow streets. Lafayette, for example, is a real problem in terms of traffic. And so, it would basically follow the same process that we're talking about for other traffic calming devices. This would just give us one other potential traffic calming device.
Right, but if you have specific streets that you want to do this on, do we want to say that we want to establish a citywide speed acceptable limit?
It'll be citywide, but selective, right?
Right, so Brian Slack suggested, and this is also what I heard from some other people, suggested that it not be a blanket 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, because then what we'd have to do would be the opposite. We'd have to have somebody recommend which streets would be 30 miles an hour or 45 or whatever. And so you would still have to have something of the same process. And there are plenty of streets in town where, like Clinton Avenue, Washington Avenue, I don't think anybody's going to ask for those to be reduced to 25 because they are main thoroughfares. They have other purposes, and they were built with other, with more traffic in mind. Faster speed limit, for example.
The one thing that I'm curious, because I agree, there's plenty of streets in Ward 9 that 30 is way too fast. I drive 25 and I feel like I'm speeding, but the lack of uniformity, is that's gonna be an engineer question too, because that may confuse drivers too. I mean, if you typically drive into a village, town, city, whatever, and it's just 30, you're not looking for those signs. So, have you asked John about that?
I asked Bob Dennison, who was the highest, he was the second in command at the New York Department of Transportation. He's a traffic engineer, that's his expertise. So,
In a city, in an urban setting?
yeah, he was responsible for all of it. So, their sense was that, well, first off, most of the streets that are smaller streets are going to be local traffic. You're not really going to have a lot of people driving through there to get from point A to point B. Like if they're driving through Kingston, they're not going to be driving on Spring Street or President's Place. So that's not really an issue. And most people are aware too that, if you see a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign, it's giving you a sign, literally, to slow down. That this is a different, this is a different zone.
Yeah, when I was doing a lot of getting ready for the traffic forum, one of the things that Diane and John talked about was, the more stop signs, for example, that the city has, the less the driver notices them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wasn't sure. I didn't ask them specifically about speed limits because if right now we're mostly 30.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're going to be half 25, half 30, and then some 15, which I know that's now more than 100%. But if that's going to be the same concern, so I mean I could reach out and find out too. But
I don't think that that's an issue. And the other thing is, we can look into looking at some of those speed meter feedback signs. So particularly in the residential areas, you put those two things in combination with each other, and I think that's the sort of thing that would really help people understand they need to drive slower. And as part of the education program, I think we need to be asking people to drive slower anyway.
Right. And then my other question is if you've had a conversation with Chief Tinty about this and how he feels about it?
No, I have not had a direct conversation with him.
Because if we change the speed limits, we need to make sure it's going to be enforceable. So.
Well, enforceable, yes, it is enforceable. We have policemen sitting there with a meter.
Difficult,
Difficult, but the point of having 25-mile-an-hour speed limits is that you're working with the residents to help them understand that different streets have different requirements. That residential streets, people should not be going 30 miles an hour down residential streets, particularly on those ones that are smaller. And so, it's part of a larger effort to try to get people to drive more carefully here in Kingston.
Now, I have a few concerns and comments when this first came up. Of course, I do my due diligence and I go on Google and, put in reduce speed limits, safety, blah, blah, blah. And pretty much you can kind of pick out articles. I found just as many articles saying this really has no bearing on safety. I could find just as many articles for and against, or saying it has no bearing, the same as children at play. There were tons of articles saying actually children at play works the opposite way, creates a false sense of security in the neighborhood. You can find articles either way for pretty much any topic in the world. So I did find, ample articles that said this is really not a speed calming, effective use of that. Again, as Andrea, I think because we're going to have different zones, enforcement is going to be very difficult to do this. The cost. I mean, I went down Albany Avenue, I counted 7 in 1/4 of a mile stretch. I counted 7 signs. So multiply that throughout the city by hundreds. And with those cities, those signs probably cost a couple $100 each, I would think. So, and then we're gonna have to we're gonna create different zones, which is gonna be, difficult. Yeah.
So there's a price to making things more safe.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I don't know.
And
I'm not sure if it does. And I think,
Specifically, you're not talking about Albany Avenue, cutting the speed, I don't know if that's up by, or Washington or something.
well, yeah, that just happened to be a street I was
But
on.
Lafayette, Brown Street, something, you know, Elmendorf, some of these other streets that clearly, people go too fast on them.
Yeah.
And you'll probably never get them to go 25, but they may
Well, you're
stop
not.
going 40, you go 30.
People who are going over 30 are gonna go over 25 too.
Yeah, but
You
they
know,
may
I
not
think
go as
we're-
high as they're going.
Yeah.
It will be safer. It will be
That's why,
safer.
too, you can find all kinds of things on the internet.
Yes, you can.
So that's why I'm relying on studies from the Federal Highway Safety Administration. Those are authoritative. Those are not put out by the gas companies or the car companies. I've talked to, the engineers and people responsible in the county for transportation issues, and they think that this is a good idea. And so, that's where I'm getting my information from and my argument for this. And I think too, slower speed limits are safer. There's actually an organization that's calling for 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. 20 is plenty. And so, and I recognize what you're saying, that there might be some discrepancy if there are different speed limits. But I think people are smart enough to be able to see a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, particularly if it's in their neighborhood. So, a large part of this, a large part of the problem is that over 90% of the people who speed are people from the neighborhood. And
So why would they notice there's
Thank you, sir.
this
because you're putting a
traffic?
25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign, and now you're asking them to drive slower. And like Doug said, people have a kind of gauge of how much faster than the speed limit they'll go. So when you have a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, people are actually going more like 35 if they're going above the speed limit.
Yeah.
Same with 25. They would be going faster, but they wouldn't be going 35. They would be going more like 30 if they're going above the speed limit. So,
It's the inverse of a rising tide.
no, that's studies.
That's gonna bring all the boats
You
down.
don't know what you're talking
Randy,
about.
Randy, you're just asking for a resolution
Ron
to
says.
request the state to permit us to do this if we want to do this down the line.
That's right.
All you're doing is asking the state to basically expand your authority to do this
Right.
if appropriate.
Right, so it's just asking to have a different tool in our quiver, a different way of calming the traffic, so that if we think this is something that's good to do, we've got the potential to do it.
Right.
And so, there's a lot of possibility down the line after that, but this is not the argument about, as pointing out, this is not the argument about whether to reduce it, but to have the permission from the state to do it if we think it's the right way to go in particular circumstances.
I'm also just curious to talk to the chief about how the enforcement campaign went, to see, because they said they collected data throughout that 3-week time
Mhm.
period to see,
We're actually going to be getting a report from them fairly soon.
yeah, so I'm kind of curious to see that, because maybe, and when I talked to Chief Tinty about a week into the campaign, he said it was mostly running stop signs.
I think
Was-
cell phone usage too and illegal turns.
Well, that's the first week, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
So not necessarily speeding, so
Right.
I'd also like to have a conversation on why. Is it maybe people aren't actually speeding as much, and it's just a perception of people thinking
Mhm.
others are speeding? Because that's a whole other issue. Or if it's hard to
Well-
catch.
But that's why the new design approach is not that 85% ASHTA, the old way of doing it, because that requires measuring. The problem with measuring is everybody slows down when they see the speed meter. So what they're doing now is they're looking at the objective conditions of streets, and then they've got criteria for deciding which ones would be better at a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. So there's a different way of going about it, and that's what if you go to the website for the TSMI report, you can see how they talk about it in there. So again, this is just about permission. It's not having an argument about which ones and where we would put it.
So have you had a lot of input from residents talking about the speed? And
Yeah, a lot of residents in
have you
Third
talked to
Ward.
residents about us possibly changing the speed limit, and are they for or against,
The vast majority that I talked to are for
or
it.
are for it?
You go down any of these streets and people sitting on their porches and watching some of these cars come down and hear the comments. You know, anecdotally. You know, sitting out on the porch on
Well,
summer.
But again, that's-
And all these
Everybody
motorcycles
does.
and
If
cars
you go out to
going-
Glen Street, the biggest concern I hear over there is people speeding up and down that street.
Yeah,
So-
I mean,
Everybody
everyone does it,
knows.
and my issue, well, I don't know if it's an issue, I'm just concerned is enforcement, that we don't enforce what we have now.
Mhm.
And so that, to me, enforcement is huge.
And if we're gonna spend a lot of money
Trying
on
to
the
enforce
signs and
that, what
doing
we're not
all of
doing
this.
right now, it may be, putting your money in a bag with holes.
It doesn't cost us anything to get the permission.
No, it doesn't.
So, if we get it and never use it, well, okay. But the other thing is, if we do get it, we've also opened up the way for other towns and municipalities to make the argument also. And so if other towns and municipalities start moving toward 25-mile-an-hour zones, if you go to Connecticut, for example, there's lots of places that have 25-mile-an-hour zones. If you go up to Saugerties, they've put in 25-mile-an-hour zones. They're kind of in the area of the school, so they've expanded what's allowed according to a school zone, I think. But, there are plenty of places where they put these in. So anyway, but the point is just to get the permission, and that's not going to cost us anything. And if we don't get the permission, then it's all moot anyway.
So are you writing that for, basically? You're writing a committee report to get, how these
I am,
actions?
yeah.
Okay, good.
And we can discuss further. Anybody else want to weigh in here? Okay.
I would like to see what John would have to say about this. I mean,
I've had brief conversations with him, so I'm sure he'd be open to you reach out to him. And while Steve is writing, the 311 app is ready to go. So I'm gonna go through it tomorrow myself, and then I'll show everybody, send all the information to everybody. And I know you have a communication that you're gonna send in.
Yeah, and if I was to send it, it would have been tomorrow. It would have to be tomorrow, right?
Well, by
Because-
Friday.
Okay.
So I'll help you.
Okay.
Okay. See what you think of this wording. A resolution supporting reduced speed limits from 30 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour as per the attached, which I have attached that. However, I added this. Specifically, it requested that New York State vehicle and traffic law be amended to allow cities and villages to establish area-wide speed limits. I think it's unclear just from, if we put a resolution supporting speed limits, it sounds like that's what we're trying to do right now. That
Mhm.
really is not our aim. So I want to have that somewhere in the resolution.
Yeah.
Any objection to that wording? Okay. Motion?
Motion.
Second.
Who second you? Okay. As with the last time we discussed this, I'm gonna vote for this to pass it through committee. I would like the full council to weigh in on this. You know, I think it's a big step. I think we should have everybody say in this, so I will vote yes to move it out of committee to full council. I'm not quite sure how I'm gonna vote when we get there, but I'll at least vote yes tonight. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you. And that, my friends, wraps it all up.
I move with adjourn.
Second?
Public safety meetings are longer than August.
Huh?
They're becoming longer than August. Because of the analysis. So thanks for coming back with us. We asked you to get it, right?
Do you have a copy of your expanded and updated? Wonderful. Can I take this? Thank you.
I actually have one.
I don't know how I feel about